checking out local apothecaries, and I'd never seen those before. I thought those went out of business in the medieval times, but apparently not.
No, not in Seattle.
Not in Seattle, exactly.
Welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. Here's your host, Scott Cowan.
So Parker, thanks a lot for making this happen. It's Tuesday. The reason I'm saying this is I just recorded an episode before you came on, and it took me 3 times to realize it was Tuesday. So I'm going to be proud to say it's Tuesday. So welcome. Thank you for being here. And why don't you, well, I guess I said before the button went live, we call you the tent guy. Let's hear your story.
Oh man, I'm flattered to be named the tent guy. I prefer to call it a pavilion for what it's worth.
Okay, so the pavilion guy. Sorry, we'll correct
it's a tent within a canvas pavilion.
Okay.
But yeah, for folks that are listening, my name's Parker. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Forij, Forij. It's the proper phonetic spelling, but we often get Forij or Forij, which also sounds cool. So I'm in on it. But yeah, I guess what Scott was referring to is I've been sleeping in my backyard in a tent under a canopy, which I refer to as the pavilion, for over a year, since really the beginning of COVID. And that was really when my business started to take over my bedroom, and I needed more of like a little bit more work-life balance, if you will, and more of just a separation from what was going on. I'd find myself waking up in the middle of the night at like 3 a.m, and my mind's racing, and I'm like, well, now I have to get up and jot down my thoughts. And then next thing I know, I'm like working, and it's like 5 a.m, and I'm like, oh my God. It wasn't great for my mental health, Scott.
Okay. Well, that's important. That's important. You got to take care of that stuff.
Yeah. So I moved out originally into my tents back March, and we're probably on iteration 9 or 10 now. I mean, I wish I could bring you back there, Scott, but I've built like a little platform. So I've got like 6 inches coverage off of the ground. And then I have, my tent structure. I've got 6 inches of memory foam. I've got like a nice weighted comforter, another comforter, my full pillow spread. And then above me, I have a 10 by 10 canopy with like siding. Mm-hmm. So I stay pretty warm. I slept out there all winter. It was totally fine. It's more so the wind that can get you.
Okay.
So yeah, I've been sleeping out in my tent, trying to grow our company and leveraging my bedroom as sort of an office space. And yeah, this past summer we brought in some additional team members, some interns from the University of Washington. And so they would come into the office and they thought it was cool that the office was in my old bedroom, which I was like, great. If you think it's cool, that's awesome.
So on your website, it says, and I'm going to just read the first sentence. Sure. It says, Parker Olson isn't exactly a run of the mill Boston based 20-something year old.
Yeah, go ahead.
What brought you out to Washington?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm from the East Coast originally. I went to undergraduate school at the University of Minnesota, but I've kind of always been trying to push west. I don't know if that was just a need to like explore or what, but I figured I would enjoy it more out here in terms of just the people and the community and outdoor things. And I definitely have. So I got a job in a consulting role, like a management consulting role out in Seattle after undergraduate back in, what would that have been, 2018, and came out and took the role, and it was okay. Obviously I'm no longer working there, but yeah, came out here and, didn't know anyone, I'd been to Seattle once to interview. So yeah, that was kind of the start of my journey there. And yeah, it's just started exploring the city, and I'm not sure if it says it on the website there, but next thing I know, I'm checking out local apothecaries, and I'd never seen those before. I thought those went out of business in the medieval times, but apparently not.
No, not in Seattle.
Not in Seattle, exactly. I'd never seen an apothecary before. And yeah, I went to a class on adaptogens and tonics, and that's actually really where I found functional mushrooms, which is really what our company's based on today.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when I think of functional mushrooms, I think of sauteed with my steak.
Ooh.
I mean that, but what do you mean by functional mushrooms?
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of a developing term. I would think that awareness is still growing.
Okay.
But when I talk to people, right, and maybe it's similarly in your mind, I'm curious to hear what your mental construct of fungi or mushrooms are. But I often hear people reference mushrooms as either, you have like portobello, or if you know what you're talking about, like matsutake or chanterelles or morels or white button mushrooms or oyster mushrooms, things, you'd maybe put on a steak or saute with butter. And then you have like psychedelic mushrooms that are just like drugs. And like, there's a lot of opinions around it, right? I think, the more progressive thinkers are thinking it's, definitely can be used more medicinally. There's definitely, people out there that believe that they're pretty like wild drugs and can really send you off on the wrong course. But that's really it. And I found that a lot of people believe that sort of construct. It's sort of this like black or white. The reality is that mushrooms, are belong under the fungi kingdom. And I've read estimates that as a society, right, we've only discovered about 9% of all fungi species in the world. And to give you a sense, they think there's, I don't know, like 200 times more fungi species than plant species, in the world. So it's this massive kingdom, and there's really, a ton of species. But what I'm getting at is that mushrooms, which are the fruiting bodies of fungi, they really fall on a scale. It's not this black and white paradigm. It's sort of, way on the left side, maybe you have these edible mushrooms that you would eat and they have nutritional value, right? Vitamins or protein or whatnot. And then on the way other side, you have psychedelic mushrooms that have more of these, like, I guess I'll just refer to them as other benefits or effects. And so in the middle, there is a sector of mushrooms that I refer to, and I think others refer to as functional mushrooms. And so, some names that maybe you've heard, it's like lion's mane, chaga, reishi, cordyceps, turkey tail, even shiitake are showing to have some sort of these like medicinal or functional benefits. And, you can eat really most of those mushrooms. Like chaga, you can't, you'd really have to make like a tea out of chaga because it's really like hard. It's sort of like a wood bark. But like lion's mane, for example, is really delicious, still has like awesome protein value, et cetera. But they've been shown, and there's lots of studies that are being done and have been done to show that they have additional benefits as well. So they fall under this category in my mental construct, at least under this like functional category. So added benefits outside of like nutrition or vitamin contents.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you stumbled upon this because of a class. And first off, you stumbled on it because you went to an apothecary. Say the word for me, please.
Yeah.
Help me out. Thanks. No, anyway, and you hadn't been to one of those before, and then you end up at this class. Your awareness has expanded, and you've gone down the rabbit hole, I guess we'll call it that, of all of these benefits that these fungi can offer us.
Yeah. So that's kind of it, right? They served a tea that had the reishi mushroom that I referenced in it. And I really was not a believer in some of these functional ingredients. I was still kind of skeptical on CBD. I often compare the functional mushrooms to like, they can have effects similar to how CBD can have effects on your body. Okay. And they served this reishi tea, and I didn't know what was in it, just thought it was a tea. And about 10 minutes after I started drinking it, I realized I was just like super calm. I describe it as this like Zen high. I like I'm pretty high wired. I have a need to be productive all the time. And it was very like calming, but in sort of like an energizing way. Like I just felt very like content and focused on what was going on in this class. And I was like, what's in this? And she's like, oh, like we'll get to that in a couple of minutes, but there's this functional mushroom reishi and goji berry, and like it may have a calming effect. And I was like, holy shit. It's like, excuse my language. I was like, this is cool. I was like, this is interesting. Like now I'm interested. Okay. So yeah, it's kind of spiraled out of control, but similar, around that same time frame when I moved out here, I had mentioned, didn't know anyone and had never been out here. So I had a lot of time on my hands. So I was doing this thing where every single month I'd try a different diet and then just see how it would affect my body. So I did it for about 18 months.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And that was just like for fun the first couple months. And then I was like, okay, I almost became addicted to this like subtle challenge of like, okay, typically for me, it was the first 17 days were really tough. And then after that, it became much easier. And I would see like the impacts of like how a different, sort of like nutritional regimen or just any general regimen would be affecting me. So on one of those, after I learned about, the functional mushrooms, I went off of coffee and I started just drinking like basically mushroom powder.
So that's just
tea.
quackery. Coffee is like the perfect food group. It is, since I have my umpteenth cup for the day, I love coffee. I can't imagine.
Okay. Yeah, I do too. And so that was for me. I was like, this will be interesting. So it was definitely tough at first. And then I noticed like was feeling awesome. I definitely was crashing way less, was sleeping a lot better.
Really?
But, transparently. And at that point I was drinking a couple cups a day, but I love coffee. As well. So after the month was over, I kind of went back to drinking coffee, but I really enjoyed the effects I was seeing from these functional mushrooms. I wanted to kind of keep them in my life. So I went and I looked on the market, and there were a lot of these, functional mushroom powders on the market. But they had this really like earthy flavor. So there are other products that are like functional mushroom coffee. So it actually combines like basically instant coffee with this mushroom powders, but it still didn't taste great. There's sort of these like tea alternatives that also didn't, it was just sort of like earthy, where like you can drink it a couple times, but you're not like looking forward in the morning. Like I look forward in the morning to have a cup of coffee.
Right.
And so for me, I started taking these like basically hyper potent extracts of these functional mushrooms, and I put them in my oatmeal in the morning, like a really healthy oatmeal. So I was kind of still getting those benefits, but I was still able to enjoy my cup of coffee.
So did you notice, was it, to interrupt you, but did you notice the same benefits when it was in the oatmeal as when you were drinking it as a coffee? Okay. So you did. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. When I went off of coffee, I was just drinking it with like no caffeine. And so I was more so just seeing like, they're definitely like the benefits when I like had just started were way more apparent, because I was taking relatively higher doses. And I would say like the biggest thing now for me is, now because I sort of, I supplement with them all the time, and our products are based off of these extracts. I've found that I really just haven't gotten sick since I started supplementing. And you'll read about that. People will say once they started supplementing with functional mushrooms, they no longer get sick. Now, do I believe that it's like, hey, if you ever want to get sick again, take these? No, but it's simply something that I've correlated. I'll say.
So maybe it's a better first line of defense than
that's not. Yeah. That's kind of how I think about it.
Okay.
So yeah, started putting it in my oatmeal, and then created a granola product, and similarly around this time when I was just like creating what are really the initial product was. I signed up, I had sort of gone past 18 months of 1 month diets, and I kind of wanted something a bit broader, sort of like a longer training, if you will, right? Instead of a month. And so I signed up for my first half Ironman. And that's how I got into Ironman training. It was more of just this need to like, I don't know, put myself through misery for a certain amount of time for delayed gratification.
Well, there's a lot to be said about delayed gratification. I don't know that an Ironman is, anyway, I tease, but okay. I want to talk about your Ironman stuff a little bit. We'll get to that, but
okay.
But I want to ask, so for 18 months, you tried 18 different diets.
Yes. So the first 12 were all food based. And then I got into, so you'll love this, one of the like diets, because I sort of shifted into a lifestyle change, was I slept outside for a month. And so I had done that before I moved into my tent permanently and really enjoyed it. So I did that for a month, like meditated for a month. What were some other ones that I did? There were just like different tweaks I would make to like my daily habits, and then see what sort of impact it would cause.
So let's go. Let me ask you this question, both good and bad. So of those 18-month experiments, what was the worst? Like what was like, oh, this just sucked. Yeah. And what was the best?
Yeah. So the worst one, and so it was also in the winter. So I wonder sometimes of like how the seasons play into this a little bit, but gluten-free was really tough for everybody who has celiac disease. Like, God bless your soul. I don't know if it was just me, but I really struggled with gluten free, and I found myself like I would wake up in the middle of the night and be hungry, and maybe I just wasn't eating appropriately when I went off of gluten, but I found that to be really challenging.
Okay, so gluten was tough. How about what was the one that you kind of said, if I had to pick one of these, I'd go with this. What would you have stuck with? And
I'll just quickly add a caveat of I really enjoyed some of the months on many of the diets. However, I don't think a lot of them were sustainable for me or in general. So like Whole30, once I got into like day 17 of eating Whole30, like it was tough to eat Whole30, but I would just eat like the exact same thing. And I like was feeling awesome. And like, I legitimately needed less sleep to operate. Like I was sleeping less and feeling great. But it just wasn't sustainable. So for me, like the ones that are really sustainable that I found to be really awesome was I did 100% whole food ingredients, so like whole foods. And that one was awesome. Kind of a no brainer there. And then also when I was eating vegetarian, I felt really, really awesome as well.
Okay.
And so those were the two. And so so Forij today, like one of our pillars is like, we focus on whole food ingredients.
Okay.
So anything we include in our, in our packages, in our granolas today, like you'll recognize the ingredient, or it'll be a functional mushroom that you're learning about, but it will still be like something you could arguably forage for or harvest from the ground.
Okay. So, all right, let's go. Okay. Backtrack just a little bit. So you had that first cup of tea, you're in the class, you're being enlightened. What brought you to taking the functional mushrooms in blending them into granola? How did you transition there?
Yeah. So I had this awesome experience. And so functional mushrooms fall under this basically Eastern medicine category of adaptogens, right? And I mentioned this class was on adaptogens or tonics, and just a little bit of background there. So adaptogens are a category of, foods basically, or ingredients or raw goods that basically help your body adapt to stressors. So adaptogens adapt, right? And so they can sort of they basically support your body through the three standard stages of stress. So I'm going to blank on them now. Like one of them is like resistance. One of them is exhaustion, and there's a third one, but these are basically scientifically proven phases that your body goes through, that your body's been trained to, maybe like you see a tiger when you're a Neanderthal, or today, like your boss like emails you, like your body and your heart rate will go through these like three initial stages.
Okay.
So anyways, I basically started getting pretty into these functional mushrooms, and I wanted to try other ones because I had such a great experience. And, then next thing I know, I asked the teacher and was like, hey, where would be the best place to source these? Because that was something that the teacher mentioned. She says, a lot of people will try ingredients like these and they think that they're a sham because they'll purchase them. They'll be like, oh, I'm going to try and purchase something a little bit less expensive because I'm trying it. And they'll purchase them basically where they haven't really been sourced very well. And it isn't like great quantities or potency of the ingredients. And then they won't have a good experience. And then they'll be like, oh, this is a sham.
Okay.
So I started going to an apothecary up in Ballard. It's since closed. It was the Botanical Garden Apothecary, and started sourcing my own and trying different functional mushrooms. And I would be like, all right, I'm going to do this for a couple of weeks, see what I like, see what I don't like, what's going on, and doing more research in terms of a lot of the studies that had been done in terms of benefits that they have. Next thing I know, I joined the Puget Sound Mycological Society, which is our local mushroom club. Started getting really into mushroom foraging. I sat on the board of the Puget Sound Mycological Society for 2 years. And then, as mentioned, when I started training for this half Ironman, I was like, I need to optimize my diet. So that's where I sat down, kind of looked at the previous 18 months, and I said, okay, it's whole food ingredients that I think will be able to be sustainable for me, and functional mushrooms. And that's what I want to start building into my diet. And so that's really where I started with this oatmeal. And then that turned into a granola that was more like on the go, or that I could kind of bring around, or like before training, after training, I didn't have to like prepare. And so that was sort of like the progression of the concepts.
Okay. Mm-hmm. We're going to pause and we're going to talk about your Ironman. We're going to come back to this.
Cool.
But so first off, what was the inspiration to be crazy? Sorry. To train for a half Ironman.
Yeah, I think it was just a need to be challenged. Like okay. The monthly dieting it was like, oh, like you can do things that you thought were hard. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a need for like something greater than what I'd already been doing.
So how long did you train before you attempted your first half?
Yeah. So I started training really in like February, March of last year, and then I raced it in August timeframe. Okay. So what is that, like 6 months?
6 months, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so how was the actual event? Was it?
It was horrible.
Okay, specifically, what was the worst part of it?
Yeah, so all the actual Ironman events got canceled because of COVID, and so I raced with some of my friends on our own, and so it's unaided. And I didn't, I thought I was taking my nutrition seriously, but I didn't, consume enough calories, or in particular sodium, while I was in the bike portion. So the half Ironman event, you swim 1.2 miles, you bike 65, 62, and then you run 13.1.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's pretty bad. But it's really important, obviously, to be like consuming calories throughout the day and like throughout the race, because you can't just like fuel ahead of time and then like, perform off of that. So, what happened to me mile 9 of the run is, I bonked, which is it's a term that basically refers to when your body runs out of salt reserves. And so salt reserves are salts are basically what power your neurons to like fire and like control your muscles. And so when you run out of salts in your body, your neurons start to fail basically, and your muscles start to fail. So like mile 9, I like could no longer run, like was walking and like would continuously try and run. And like, you can't run, like was losing control of my body, and like was starting to get lightheaded, and it was bad. And then, I ended up walking the last 3 miles, but
you completed it.
We did complete it. It was pretty miserable, those last 3 miles. But we did complete it. Mm-hmm.
Will you do another one?
Well, so when they canceled the event, they said, hey, we're not going to give you your money back, because the half Ironman's a $400 race and the full Ironman's an $800 race. And my friends and I were thinking, okay, if we ever want to do an Ironman, this would maybe be the time, because we could apply that $400 to a full Ironman race, and it's COVID. So like you have a lot of time, like you could train. And so kind of without thinking about it, and it was actually before the half Ironman race, we signed up for the full Ironman, which is now in late June. And so if you had talked to me the day after the half Ironman, I was pretty upset. I was like, that was horrible. I don't want to do this again. But as I recovered, I definitely was, we getting excited. We're in week 9 out of 20 weeks of training. It's pretty bad. It's pretty miserable, but we're still excited about it overall.
So where is this Ironman that you're going to be participating in?
Yeah, I'm doing the Coeur d'Alene Ironman. So I think it's the weekend of like June 25th. I've only been to Coeur d'Alene once, but it's gorgeous. So definitely looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, it's very pretty over there. What a great place to ruin by swimming, running, and biking.
I know. I'll probably never want to go back.
But at the same time, so are you training better this time?
Yeah, so definitely trying to focus more on nutrition, and just be more like, you definitely learn from the first time, and they say that. So I'm glad that first experience happened. And so now like I'm more carefully looking at like basically I think about it as like hydration, nutrition, and then salts. So, whenever I'm out training, I try and hydrate about every half hour, and like a couple sips of water, or like, some sort of like not energy drink. I try and stay pretty natural, but like something with electrolytes in it that doesn't have sugar in it. And then nutrition, right? So it's like I try and consume calories about every hour and a half. And it depends on what sort of segment of the race you're in, or how long you're going, of what exactly you'd be consuming, of whether you want sort of like short, fast firing carbohydrates, or like longer burn carbohydrates, and then salts. So like I'm paying way more attention of like, okay, if I'm going to be training for this long, I need to be like consuming X amount of salts or electrolytes every so often.
Okay. I tip my cap to you. Thanks. And shake my head at the same time. It's people that participate in these things are it's amazing to me what you're going to accomplish. First off, it's a huge accomplishment. And at the same time, well, no, you're going to do it. We're going to think positive. You're going to do it. And at the same time, what you're willing to put yourself through. I mean, it's just, wow. I mean, that's cool.
Yeah. And, for me as well, right? So like starting my own company, it's like, there's so many challenges and it's so like difficult and frustrating frequently, where I found that, training with such intensity, right? Because it's like a 4 or 5 month commitment of like 6 days a week. Saturday, Sundays are the worst. So it's not like you get a lot of free time outside of like the work week. But I found it to be really nice where it's like you've just been working all week and like you're getting crushed or like all day, but you force yourself to go work out and you don't really want to go work out, but it's nice because you've blocked the time. And then when you're working out, you're not thinking about work. But when you're working, you're not thinking about working out. So just because they're both so intense in their own manner, I found them to like pair quite well because they sort of take my mind off of the other.
Okay.
And who knows? Maybe I'm just justifying that in my own mind, Scott. Who knows? We'll never know. But
well, look, at the end of the day, you're going to complete this thing. If you sign up for another one, that's on you. And it's very cool. I'm giving you a hard time, but really, honestly, I think it's pretty amazing that you're willing to do this while running your own company on top of it, because as everybody knows, running a company is the easiest thing that you can do in the world. There's never any problems. Everything goes perfectly. You just sit back and it just happens, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So no, it doesn't. Where did you've been experimenting, you've been learning. What was the inspiration to start Forij?
Yeah. So I think back to, when I started doing this dieting, and I think part of the dieting for me was that I had just graduated college. I'm very like independent. I like to think I'm unconventional person. And so, but I just joined a very like structured job, there's a lot of expectations, but you're very like, for lack of a better term, essentially like a slave's not the right word because there's a lot of, tabooness about it, but you're essentially like, you just do what everybody else tells you to do and you're part of the structure and you just kind of fit in. And I think that was very like upsetting to me. So I needed to do something that was more my own speed. And I had always wanted to start my own company. And so I think that's what, initially got me into this dieting was like, I needed to like do something that was sort of like revolting against the game or the system.
Okay.
And so then, as I'm working through this, I had been looking at starting other companies with different ideas since I was dieting. So this will maybe be funny. I was working on a reversible pant concept. I actually have a couple of prototypes still, but like a pant concept that you could wear one way and then you could turn them inside out and wear them the other inside out. Okay. That was one concept. There were a bunch of others. And so really the trigger though for me was, I was working and I was working on this recipe more so for myself and like I would bring it into the office and let people try it. And I was trying to like make it really good, more so just to like, I don't know. It was just like fun to try and build something that other people thought was cool. And my friend dragged me to this startup conference in San Francisco called HustleCon. And it was more so for us to hang out. He lives in New York and he was coming out and I was like, yeah, I'll go with you. We can hang out. And so when you're at those things, everybody's kind of got like an angle, and everyone's like, oh, like what, like I'm working on this. Like, what are you working on? And at first I was like, nothing. Like, I'm just here to hang out with my buddy. And then, people lose interest really quickly. And so then I was like, well, I'm working on this like functional mushroom food product. There's nothing like it in the space, because that was also true. Like that was a need of mine. I was looking for like something to consume functional mushrooms with, where I couldn't, taste it. And it was really part of like a like balanced nutrition item, superfood, if you will. So I started to say that, and some people were like, I don't know what that is. And then other people were like, oh, that's really interesting. Mushrooms are really like hot right now and they're kind of exploding. And so a couple angel investors were like, send me your pitch deck. And I was like, sure thing. Send it to you right when I get home. And so of course I didn't have anything. I didn't even have like a name. There wasn't a finalized concept. So I went home, went on to like one of the freelancer websites, got like a logo designed and like put together a PowerPoint deck in like 3 days And I was working with some people at work who I trusted on it. And I was like, hey, can you just help me put something together that like looks kind of legit? And I'm going to send it to these guys. And, I sent it out and we chatted, and there was starting to be some engagement where I was like, oh, this is cool. Like people who like start companies think that this could be a real company. Like, I'm just going to start acting like that while we're engaging. So, then I started going to local cafes and was like, hey, I have this like really innovative functional mushroom product, like granola product. Do you want to sell it in your cafe? And then, like some cafes were like, yeah, like, let me try it. And they're like, oh, this is really good. Yeah. We'll bring this on. And so that was more of like the natural progression, but it was really that like trigger of like somebody else who I in my mind thought was like legitimate, was like, this is cool. So that was really like the initial push for me.
Okay. Well, so when you're making granola for yourself, you're making it at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have a commercial kitchen, or you're making it at home.
Yeah.
When you started going to the cafes, you had a production challenge, I'm going to guess. There, all of a sudden you're like, oh, how do I scale this to serve a cafe? So how'd you navigate that?
Yeah. So I was still working full time, and I worked full time for about a year while I was like slowly iterating on and just like trying different things. And so, yeah, I was making it out of my cafe or my kitchen, but obviously that wasn't going to work and fly. And so then there's a local cafe on my street. And so I just walked to the cafe and was like, hey, you guys have ovens, right? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, could I use the ovens to make this granola thing that I'm working on? And they were like, sure. And so then I just started renting this space for like $100 a month, and I could use it after 5 p.m., like Monday through Friday.
Oh, wow.
So then I would go in there, and my roommate's sister at the time, she's like a really talented baker. And so she really helped me like work on the recipe, and she would come in and help, and I would essentially pay her. And she's got ownership in the company now, because she develops our recipes. Really like a co-founder, if you will. So started operating out of this cafe, and there were pizza ovens. So took a while to figure out how to not burn the granola.
Right.
Yeah. So started there, and then, that was sort of the next phase for us.
So did any of the angel investors ever?
Yeah. Good question. So all those kind of fizzled. Like, it was sort of like, hey, I'll introduce you to this person, or I think this would be really cool. And then it just kind of like fizzled out. But at that point, there was like enough, like for me, I was like, ooh, this is interesting. And like, I can like go and like sell this as a concept to people. And like, like I was pretty clueless. So I was like, okay, great. Like, everything's going to be awesome. Like, I know exactly how we're going to do this. We'll sell this to these cafes. Everyone's going to want to buy it. Like, sweet. Like, I'm just going to keep doing this. And then we'll make enough money, and I'll be able to like pay myself, and I'll quit my job. That's great. Obviously that's not how things work.
What?
And yeah, but my brother works in the food industry. Okay. He works in the supply chain. He's an ancient grain and seed specialist. He basically helps build like global supply chains around like specific niche grains or seeds. It's cool. Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. We used to make fun of him for going into agriculture, and then he actually has a pretty cool job now. So anyways, I was telling him, I was like, hey, like I'm making this granola, like what ingredients should I use? Like, what's cool? And he's like, oh, this is interesting. And like, kind of at first thought it was a joke. And then like a month later, I'd still be calling him, and he'd be like, all right, like Parker's like, I know, because I get stuck on things, and then I'm just like, need to like keep going at it. And so he told his boss about it, and his boss is really like, his boss loves like things that are out there. And so we started chatting with his boss, and I would like show him, and I was like, told his boss I moved into my tent, and he was like, what the fuck? He was like, this is badass. He's like, this is cool. And at that point, his boss was like, all right, like, I know you're in it. Like you're going to need some money. Like I'll give you some kind of like initial money. And so he, like his boss and him kind of invested.
Well, great.
Yeah. So
that's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, they got in though. They got in at a good time for a good price, for sure.
Okay.
And so, yeah, that was like, okay, now we have money. And that was last March. And then we hired some interns, and then we kind of started building a brand around it, and started, developing a better strategy, started building out advisors, bringing on more of team members, et cetera. So
I love, so I want to ask a question. So what hasn't gone right? Like, has there been like you thought, oh, I'm going to do this, and this is going to be, whatever this might be, and then it didn't work. Has there been anything like that for you in the startup phase?
Yeah, it's pretty much every day.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, like originally, when I put together a brand in like 8 hours, the original name was Mind and Body Organics, which was just horrible. And so that was like, oh, this is so cool. It's like stuff for your mind and body, and it'll all be organic, and like this is great. And like everybody was like, this is the stupidest thing ever. But I was like, had my ego involved to a degree. And then so at that point, like at one point we had to go through a rebranding, right? Our original product, it had labels that said like 100% whole food ingredients and medicinal mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody thought that they were psychedelic mushrooms. And so we were selling to this vendor out of Washington called Keep Your City Smiling. Have you heard of them?
I have not.
Oh, they would be awesome to come on this show. Yeah.
Okay. Keep Your City Smiling. Okay.
They were originally like a vendor, like photo booth company, and then COVID hit and all their events got canceled. They were relatively larger in the region, and like their revenue or future revenue went like literally to zero. And so they pivoted and they made these like localized boxes for Seattle, and then they like scaled, and they actually like completely pivoted their concept and like stayed above water. It was really cool. They had like 12 staff members, so we were selling to these like subscription boxes, and they like, everything was great. They like loved our product. And then they were like, hey, we have this really big order. And it was like a big deal. It was like 1,000 units or something. Like, can you put these together? And we like, struggled, but like put 1,000 units together in like 2 weeks. And then the buyer called me and was like, hey, like the day before, the buyer called me and was like, hey, I talked to the person who was buying these, and they specifically called out your product and were like, what are you trying to get our staff high? Like medicinal mushrooms. And then they were like, we can no longer work with you. And we had like just spent all this time like making all these units, and like we got cut, and it was pretty like heart-blowing.
Yeah.
So there's always stuff like that going on,
See, here's the thing. Why I like to ask that question of people is oftentimes out of that adversarial situation, we learn something really very cool.
Yeah.
At least that's what I keep trying to tell myself when I fall down on my face, that I've learned something very cool. But we always learn something.
Yeah. Keep going.
So that's why, I like that's in. So what did you end up? So you had 1,000 units, which is a lot of production for you at that time.
So, that was around the time where we were like starting to think about a rebrand, but yeah, we were still kind of selling, and like we would, we were in like the local co-op and some local stores, and we would sell online. But we ended up donating most of that because we went through a rebrand. We like got some real packaging, because all that was just sort of like craft, like standard packaging with labels, and didn't look great. And so we actually ordered some real packaging. And so we actually ended up donating like several hundred pounds of granola to a couple of food banks around the city. And that was part of it. So it was cool. Like, kind of is what it is.
Right.
It's pretty upsetting at first, but I really like your point there. And the question I think is super valid. And when I talk to people or all of, people reach out and be like, man, how do I like do what you did or prepare or something, or like, what'd you do? And the reality is like, there really isn't a good answer. It's not a great question. However, I do think that if you're going to be starting your own company or go into something that is risky, or just like, you're putting a lot on the line and you're going to be failing a lot, I think the best thing you can do is basically like prime yourself to get ready to fail and like adapt and changes and pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. So like for me, I look back on like a lot of the dieting or the half Ironman or even the Ironman training where it's like things are horrible. And like, I just like, it's awful, but like, I continue to think it like grows my comfort zone of like how much failure or overwhelmment I can manage without like collapsing. So when people ask that, I just tell them, I'm like, what can you do to like put yourself out of your comfort zone and like, force yourself to adapt or like, change things as frequently as possible and get really comfortable doing that.
Right. And it's cliched, but fail fast, because you're going to. So
yes.
But so bouncing around your website, which is something I do every time I'm talking to people, you got some pretty cool things here. You're donating 1% for the planet.
Yeah.
You've got You've got some, you're trying to get your 25% less carbon emissions. You've got B Corp sourcing.
Yeah.
Sustainable packaging. You're doing a lot of things here to ensure that what you're bringing to the market is done in a
eco-friendly or sustainable or
Thank you for helping me with words. Eco-friendly. And why don't we walk through these? The 1% for the planet. Sure. How are you guys doing that? What are you doing with that specific thing?
Yeah. So one, that was early on, we talked about, what were our values going to be, and we wanted, sort of environmentally focused to be part of it. When you think about that, you think about what are different ways you can do that. 1% for the planet was a program I've seen around. I've seen other products do, other products that I respect or companies that I think are cool. And so basically what 1% for the planet is it's like it's kind of like an umbrella corporation. And so they basically facilitate transactions between brands and nonprofit organizations that have environmental focuses. So they basically say, hey, you sign on with us, you pay a pretty like nominal fee of just like being part of the group. And then you send them basically like your profit and loss statement each year. And they say, okay, this is how much, you are basically required to donate by being part of this brand. And they have all of these associated nonprofits that they vet and sort of make sure that all the funds are being used appropriately, et cetera, that then you can either align with one of them, you can decide to donate to a broad pool where they say we're 1% for the planet, the actual organization will select, groups they think are really in need, or you can donate to a couple different ones. So it's sort of is up to the brand itself, but we thought it was awesome. And I don't know, there's so many great nonprofits that are associated. Last year, we sort of did a broad donation and, allowed 1% for the planet to take the proceeds. And I think that they donated there were some fish, some salmon focused nonprofits in the PNW that they donated to. But we'd love to kind of get more closely aligned with some organizations there. But it's awesome, easy to set up. I would totally recommend to other companies out there as well.
Very cool. And then naked sprouted oats.
Yeah.
What are naked sprouted oats? Let's help me with that. And then we'll talk about how about that partner is doing, their emissions.
Yeah. So my brother, the company that he works for, they source this naked sprouted oat. And so we found this ingredient through them. And basically what that means, right? So a sprouted oat, it's something that is sprouted. And basically like in layman's terms, how I like to think about sprouted things is that they're actually more like bioavailable. So if you were to look at like a sprouted oat versus a standard oat, there may not be a ton different from a nutrition standpoint, but like studies show that like your body's actually going to be able to absorb way more of that nutrition than it would of a standard oat. So you see like sprouted seeds, typically like, and you'll notice that if you were to like, eat a sprouted oat in an oatmeal versus a normal oat over time, you would probably notice you'd be getting more energy and like be full for longer with a sprouted oat.
Okay.
And then naked, this is kind of like a newer term, but naked means that it's actually grown without a hull. So oats, right? There's typically this like hull on the outside and the oats on the inside. And so these naked oats are grown without a hull. And so what that actually allows them to do is that they actually have a higher protein content, a lower carb content. And in harvesting practices, it doesn't require like the machinery and the manpower, et cetera, to actually remove the hull. So they're like way more sustainably sourced and harvested. So, instead of like oat being harvested and then sent to one manufacturer to dehull and then to another place to actually sit and then like be processed and sold, these are just harvested, sent there, processed and sold. And so you're actually cutting out not only that middle process, but also the transportation costs associated with it. So they partnered with, I think it was like Sloan, I forget, is that University of Chicago or one of the MBA programs? I think it was Northwestern's Is Sloan.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's Sloan.
And Sloan did a study in terms of like how much, more environmentally friendly is this process than a standard process. And they found it was about 25%.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Less carbon emissions from using a naked oat. So it's not only like more nutritionally potent, but it's also more sustainable. So that's great. Yeah. So we use that oat today. It's been, really awesome. We have found that it's really hard to, explain that to people. So we're still struggling there. And we are, we are thinking about, if that's going to be part of our identity moving forward or not. So it's up in the air, but it's super cool oat. And for what it does, I just wish more people kind of knew about it and it was like better understood and more widely available. Because there's also a supply chain issue there that we don't have to go into, but
sure. Well, with COVID, there's supply chain issues
everywhere.
Yeah. I'm going to guess that a lot of our listeners don't understand what a B Corp is.
Yeah.
And you guys source a lot of your ingredients from a company that's advertised as a B Corp.
Yeah. So we source, I think it's about 80% of our ingredients from B Corp sourcers. So B Corp, it's certification. Think of like an organic certification, right? That a company can get. Mm-hmm. And really, it's kind of the gold standard in the market for sustainability practices. So from what I understand, becoming B Corp certified can take over a year, and it's a pretty expensive process. And depending on how large you are for the timing, but it's a pretty expensive process. And the B Corp certification board or team will do like a full audit of the company, like everything from sourcing ingredients all the way through manufacturing, packaging, transporting, et cetera. And they basically look to see and they rank you against their benchmarks of like, how sustainable are your efforts? And like, are you just selecting the lowest cost supplier or like the lowest cost distributor? Or are you like actually focused on how that's going to impact the environment? And so they have like really high standards. It's pretty difficult to get B Corp certified. And it's sort of this like stamp of approval that says, hey, like we've done all this vetting, all this auditing, and this company does a really great job in terms of accounting for the environment. So it's an awesome sort of certification to look out for. I think that would be awesome in our future. It's a little bit like cost prohibitive right now for us. But definitely, really, really cool certificate.
But you're buying from a B Corp. So you're contributing to that reduced footprint.
Right. That's sort of the theory. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And then your packaging is labeled as sustainable. What is it you're doing about the packaging that is, I see that you got to drop it off at your store, but what's special about the packaging?
Yeah. So our packaging is recyclable. So I say that with an asterisk, right? Because it's recyclable. I believe it's the recycling number 5, maybe, but you can't actually recycle it in your home recycling bin, which is a bummer. Okay. Like you have to drop it off, and most grocery stores have these bins where it's like you can drop off what's referred to as like in-store drop-off recycling programs. And so it's really cool. Like in theory, and our thought was like, okay, if we're going to be environmentally sustainable, we want to be making decisions that will help us get to that point. This isn't a perfect solution. There aren't really, great solutions on the market for resealable packages that you can recycle in home. They're getting there, or compostable. I think that would be ideally what we would use, but they typically are not keeping product fresh, or they puncture really easily. So you'd have a ton of issues. We decided to go with this recyclable package, and it's awesome. And like, I really like the ethos behind it. We, transparently, Scott, I think we're thinking about moving away from it, and actually switching more towards working with a program that looks at your waste, and then you actually pay for them to upkeep plastic and waste, globally, like 2 times the amount. So you become waste negative. But there's an actual real impact versus assuming the consumer will bring your packages in store. So I try and call about 10 customers a week, or talk with people. I'll just wait in stores, and I found under 1% of people even like will know or recognize what our pack, like how to recycle our package, or that it's recyclable at all. So we're afraid that while in theory it's a great idea, people may just be putting our package in their normal recycling bin, and then essentially like tainting that entire recycling load. And so in theory, it's awesome, but we're not sure the impact is really occurring there.
Fair enough. And that's an unfortunate thing. So currently you have 2 varieties of granola.
Mm-hmm.
And I like you can't decide, buy both. Trouble decide. I like that. I just like that. That's pretty cool. Trouble decide, get them both. I like that. But what is kind of the difference between the Energize and the Recover?
Yeah. So early on,
is that where the functional mushrooms kick in? Is that the variable?
Yeah. So, and I will also preface we're actually are pivoting on this a little bit, but I'll explain the original theory and then findings behind it. So when we were, originally selling our product, there was a broad blend of functional mushrooms. And, I think a lot of people were like, well, hey, what specific benefit does this have? And it was like, well, we're using this broad blend. There are these different benefits. But I think for a lot of people, we kind of got the indication that it was like, hey, it'd be maybe more easily understandable if there are more specific benefits tied. So we switched to this product offering where there's an Energize product and a Recover product. And they're the exact same fundamental ingredients, right? Of whole food ingredients. And then they just have different functional mushroom extracts tuned to help you energize or recover. And we landed on those 2 because we asked consumers basically, hey, when do you eat granola? And we found that, about 60% consumers are eating it, or 60 or 70% were eating it for breakfast, and about 30 or 40 would eat it as maybe an afternoon snack or a snack after a workout or a hike. So this Energize was positioned to be hey, if you're going to be eating this for breakfast, this will help you with natural energy and mental focus and sort of immune support that would be great to have for that breakfast slot. And then this Recover is more that afternoon, evening sort of nightcap or post workout where it's hey, this is going to help you physically recover and kind of relax and unwind. So that was our original thesis. What we found is that the Energize sells about 3 times more. And that consumers are just still prefer the Energize more in this afternoon setting. It's hey, instead of I'm trying to unwind in the afternoon, it's hey, I'm almost need to re-energize in the afternoon.
I got that afternoon crash. I want a little pick me up.
Yeah. So the thesis was a little off. So it is what it is, right? You live and you learn. So we're going to be in June or July, we're going to launch actually a couple different flavors. So today we just have this original cinnamon, but we're coming out with this sunflower seed cacao, vanilla almond. We'll keep our cinnamon. And then we're going to move to one blend of functional mushrooms that are more focused around this natural energy, mental focus, and immune support.
Okay. So you've got a couple of new flavors coming out in a slight modification of the functional mushroom component of the.
Yeah.
All right.
So you learn.
Yeah. So I always ask people these questions. So these are kind of stock questions, but when you're not busy making granola and saving the world and training for an Ironman, what do you do with yourself?
It's a good question, Scott.
I mean, with that 30 minutes of your day that we haven't spent for you already, I mean, what do you do? So you're relatively new to the area. What have you found in the Seattle area that you think is pretty cool?
Yeah. It's funny. I found myself in this yesterday. So I really, before I started training for the triathlon, I'd really gotten into biking. But now, because I love biking in the city, but now it's I do that in training. So that is switched from a hobby more into this training. Right. In the spring and the fall, and I mentioned this earlier briefly as well, I love mushroom foraging. So I really enjoy that, and hiking and sort of getting the outdoors. So all of those are really enjoyable to me, but those are more of leisurely but physical activities. So again, while I'm training, I'm really not doing a ton of that. So for me, it's if I'm not training or I'm not working or sleeping, I've now started to get more into cooking. So I enjoy I've recently found some of the Pacific focused ingredients or Asian ingredient markets that I had never really seen before. I've enjoyed going there and trying new things. So that's sort of what I've been interested in recently. But yeah, I think once training ends, I'll start to get some more of my hobbies back. Hopefully, is the plan.
All right. So you mentioned you like coffee, which makes you okay with me. Yeah. Where's a great place around you for coffee?
Ooh.
Like,
My
where's your
favorite
where's your
cafe.
go-to? Do you have a go-to coffee place?
I like it for coffee and like drinks or something even, and their breakfast is awesome too. Have you been to Good Weather Cafe?
I have not.
It's in Chop House Row.
Okay.
If you know where that is, it's in Capitol Hill. It's in this sort of like back alley row.
Okay.
Awesome place. They've got great coffee, just like cool. It's actually like a cycling cafe, but it's like you don't have to be a cycler to go there. And they have this great little outdoor patio. Really
Okay.
great spot for like drinks but like coffee and breakfast as well.
Okay. Excellent.
What about you, Scott? Where would you recommend for me?
Oh boy. Wow. See, so what you don't know about my backstory is I lived on the west side most of my life of Washington, and we moved over to central Washington about 4 years ago because I wanted to get away from the traffic.
Fair.
So I kind of don't go back to Seattle a whole lot anymore. So anything I say to you might be, was pre-COVID, so I can't vouch for them. But some of the places over there that I really like, and this is going to sound really kind of funny, because have you ever been to Disneyland or Disney World?
I've been to Disneyland.
Okay. And have you ever been to Vegas?
Yeah.
Okay. So take the best and worst of both Disneyland and Las Vegas.
Okay. Where are we going?
Well, to me, it's like sensory overload.
Yeah. Okay.
Like,
yeah.
Disneyland is overwhelming. Vegas is overwhelming, right? And you can make a lot of bad choices in Vegas and all those things. And then now add coffee.
Okay.
And that is how I describe the Starbucks roastery. Have you been to the Starbucks roastery?
The one in Capitol Hill?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's amazing, but it's overwhelming. Like if I lived in the city, I wouldn't go there very often. But if you hadn't been there, I would say you should go check that out once.
I agree. Yeah. I took my mom there, but keep going.
Yeah. So to me, like I went there, and I used to work for Starbucks many years ago, and a buddy of mine and I went there, and he's like, he kept telling, you got to go. I'm like, okay. So we go there and we have, a siphon press of coffee each, 2 pastries. And then I had their, whiskey barrel aged iced coffee, which was maybe the single best food I've ever had in my life. I mean, it was amazing. And it was absolutely like the presentation of it was, it was just awesome. Right. And, that was like $60 worth of coffee. So that's kind of like the whole Disneyland in Vegas thing. You don't go there because it's, you're just going to spend what you're going to spend. But it was just an absolutely, quintessential Seattle thing to me.
Yeah.
But I think one of the places that I've enjoyed going for coffee over there is Mabel's.
Haven't heard of that one. I'll look it up.
And Mabel's is over on out in Ballard area.
Okay. And my mind's still on this like whiskey barrel aged. That sounds good.
Yeah. It was the best of coffee and whiskey. I mean, because it was served in a cocktail glass with 1 ice cube, right? So it was like having a cocktail.
Yeah.
And it had both the flavor and the aroma of both coffee and whiskey. It was awesome. It was amazing. Wow. Now I got to go to Seattle. I don't even know if they have it right now. I don't know if they have it right now.
Okay.
So, but Mabel's has, vinyl records you can play, great coffee, kind of fun, casual place. So that was one. For me, this is me. A trip to Seattle is not a trip to the Seattle area unless I go to Dick's Drive-In and grab a Dick's Deluxe fries and a shake, which are, they're perfectly healthy. You can have them every day. That to me is, kind of like comfort food.
That I agree. So for me, it's like once every month or every other month. I'm like, it's time.
Yeah. And I was so excited. They got Dick's has a food truck now.
What? I didn't see that.
Yeah. They've got a food truck, and they were up in Bellingham with it. And they were a guest on the podcast, and I'm like begging them to bring it to Wenatchee. I'm holding out hope that, they'll come to Wenatchee once. I don't want them to be here regularly because that would be really bad for me.
Once a year, maybe.
once a year. But that's for me, that in the coffee realm, that's kind of what I think of.
Mabel's. I haven't heard that. I was just looking up. That looks cool. I just saved it.
Yeah, very great. Always great staff.
Yeah,
comfortable place.
Just quick question, offshoot, but Wenatchee, I mean, you're in Forage Central out there, or sorry, Foraging Central for Morels.
If you say so. I joke that I spend my entire life behind the computer screens and microphones, so I don't get out much. Truthfully, I explore Washington State in a different way, and part of the reason the site exists is so we can talk to people but I vicariously live through you guys. But I've heard that too from a couple other people that we've got that, and I don't want to go down that with you because for the time constraints.
Yeah.
But after we hit the button, I will ask you something. So, because of time constraints, I want to be respectful of your time. And why don't you let our audience know where they can find your stuff and anything else any other question that I should have asked you that I didn't? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, you can find out, we're in Central Co-op, we're in Lululemon, Leshai Market, Market Time Foods, we're in some Red Apples. We just launched in Bristol Farms down in Southern California, so not in Washington, but we're going to, continuing to sort of launch locally in some local spots, and really starting July 1st, we should be more widely available in the Pacific Northwest, actually in the East Coast, like New York, Boston area, and then also down in through California. So we're launching with one of the major distributors then, which will be exciting. But on our website, on Amazon, we do feed the giant, unfortunately. And that's Forij, right? Forij. So look us up. You usually can find us. And check out our stuff, right? I'd love to hear thoughts. We're, Scott, as I was mentioning, right? We're just trying to learn. And so if people are willing to take the time to try product and reach out and be like, hey, this is what I think. It's God, I will pay you to eat our products. I'm just curious what you think and how we can improve. Right. And it's super valuable. Awesome. So reach out. I'll send you my email, Scott, so you can link it to the show notes, but it's just Parker at forij.co, forij.co.
We'll put that down in the show notes.
Cool. Yeah. It was, definitely fun being on. If you guys want to come check out the tent, shoot me an email and I'll, let folks check out. I'm in Central District.
Are we having a tour, tent tours? Is that
for free for now, Scott, for free for now.
Okay. Yeah, well, I knew you win the tours are free, and then they'll be charging for them. There we go.
But it was great. I'm really glad we connected, Scott. It's fun coming on and just chatting with you and kind of shooting shit.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And I'll let you go. Cool. Talk to you later.
Yeah.
Join us next time for another episode of the Exploring Washington State podcast.